actually called this morning's talk Forever Changed, and it will become clear it's kind of got a double meaning, because I believe that because of what we've been celebrating, the Easter story, that not only did Jesus' death and life change everything, but that gives the potential for us to be forever changed as well. Wasn't it lovely just worshipping then today? There are times in this church where, I don't know, I just love hearing people's voices, and for some reason people's voices seem to be louder this morning than the music. I don't know, is that a good thing, Chris? I don't know, I guess it's a good thing, but I just found myself thanking God for being in a place where I can hear people worshipping with me. It's just so powerful. How was the chocolate? How was the chocolate? Chocolate? Lots of chocolate? Bit too much? Okay. I actually didn't eat that much chocolate. But my kids, we often go to Wales at Easter. We've got a property there that we share with my family, and we've got quite a bit of land. So doing an Easter egg hunt there is really good fun. So we did one for them this year, as we do every year. And I was just reminded while we were worshipping, the thing that's lovely about doing an Easter egg hunt there's all these old Welsh walls that are sort of crumbling, and there's all these nooks and crannies, best places for hiding chocolate eggs. And the lovely thing is that the kids, they come back and they've got all these bowls of chocolate and they think they found everything. But then over the next few days, it's like, it just keeps reappearing. There's all these little places where they come back. Or Ollie got up one morning and he was just looking out, and then all of a sudden I saw him go, and he's off out. He spot one in the wall. And but then the funniest thing was that my auntie and uncle, who was staying at the cottage next door, it transpired that he was actually putting more chocolate out. So I thought my kids had found all the chocolate. I'm thinking, sure, they found all the chocolate now. But he, unbeknown to us, was having the joy of sneaking a few more eggs out and then going to the kids, I've still seen some chocolate. But I just kind of thought, isn't that lovely that it was kind of like, it was the gift that keeps on giving. And that's reflective of really what I want to say this morning, is that we celebrate Easter. And I think Ben said last week, we celebrate Jesus' death and his life, and it's just one point in the year. But it should be something that we realise that it's a gift that just keeps on giving. It's something that's not just to be celebrated on one day or thought about on one day. The impact that Jesus' death and life has on us as people is something incredible. So I'm just going to ramble about a few thoughts that I feel that God's been bringing to my mind over this Easter season. Right before Easter, I kept waking up with this thought of, what is fullness of life? And then when I went to the refresh night, one of the ladies there, Rachel, you might know who she is, who goes to Create, she also came up to me and said, oh yeah, God's been speaking to me about the fullness of life. And okay, that's interesting. And then Martin Young, our senior minister, he wrote in his prayer blog that somebody had texted him, Christ is risen. Not sure what that means for me today, but it sounds good. And I thought, yeah. And Ben and I were talking about this a lot while we were away last week. What does resurrection actually mean for us today? What is fullness of life? And this uncle that I was just telling you about, who hid the chocolate, now he used to be in the Navy, my Uncle Robert, and when he sees the kids, he loves to say to them, stand by. And they're like, oh, okay, stand by. And then he'll say, there'll be an activity happening or dinner, and he'll say, when I say stand by, I mean stand by to stand by. And then he'll pause. So stand by. And that really stuck with me this week as well. I thought, it's all about being ready, isn't it? It's all about being, okay, what's this fullness of life? Am I ready? And then another thing that came back to me, not long after we moved here to Stone from London, it was probably in the first year that we were here, I used to have this recurring dream in the early hours of the morning, which was quite an uncomfortable dream. And when I think about it, almost makes me cringe a little bit. But it was a dream of me walking down Stone High Street, shouting, wake up, wake up. And that was kind of embarrassing. But that dream, every now and then, has kept coming back to me. And it's a call to me to wake up, but it's also a call, I guess, a desire that I have for our town to wake up to the life that we know that is only found in Jesus, and that we can be a part of that. We want to wake up to the fullness of life and everything that is to be found in him. So I guess what I want to look at a little bit today and ask the question is, are we fully awake to what Jesus coming to life means to me today? It happened 2,000 years ago, but what does it mean today? How does it change me? How does it change you? Our outlook and our actions. And we just sang in that song, Majesty, forever I'm changed by your love. And it says in the Bible as well that we're changed from glory to glory. We're transformed. That somehow, because of what happened when Jesus came back to life, when the Spirit of God breathed into him and he came back to life, that means we can be a part of that. So let's think about resurrection. Could I have my second slide? Missed that. Those are the verses that we might be filled to the measure of the fullness of God. And the promise, it says, I've come that they may have life and have it to the full. So we can have my next slide up. So, resurrection. What comes to mind when we think of that word? I've just put a few words there that I think are equally as valid and powerful as the word resurrection speaks of the same truth. We've got springtime, we've got awakening, newness, regeneration, healing, forgiveness, life cycles, darkness to light, renewal. And I'm sure if I opened it up to you guys, you'd come out with a whole load more. Isn't it lovely at the moment? I look out into my garden and all the leaves on the trees and the plants, it's just gone boom. You know, we are faced, aren't we, every springtime with this incredible renewal. And this is what is promised to us. This is what life is in all its fullness. It's demonstrated to us in the patterns of the world around us in creation. Isn't that lovely? I absolutely love that. And I read something this week which said that Jesus wasn't just resuscitated, because that's coming back to life, isn't it? Resuscitation is not the same as a resurrection. Resurrection is something different. When God breathed his Spirit of life back into Jesus, then came the morning that sealed the promise. The buried body began to breathe. I mean, what was that? That is just mad, isn't it? We sing that. There was a moment where Jesus' body began to breathe, and it wasn't just resuscitation. It's resurrection. It was setting something into motion that is operating beyond our limits of time and space. And this is where it blows our mind, because resurrection means it can happen again and again and again, every single day, for every single person, from now until the end of time. Isn't that amazing? That something that happened in that moment, Jesus wasn't just resuscitated, he was resurrected. He brings absolute awakening, absolute newness for anyone who chooses to believe in him. That spirit of life, that spirit of fullness is available to absolutely every single one of us. His death and resurrection is like a reset. And there's that lovely hymn, isn't there, that says, new every morning, great is your faithfulness. That is what renewal is. That is what resurrection is for us. It's something that we can plug into every single day. We can get up and we can be like, you know what? This is new. God, you are new for me. Your Spirit of life is new for me every day. The breath of the Spirit helping us to live in a new way, even before we die. Now, I heard a story this week, and I think I shared it on Facebook, that Karen, our lovely Karen Wardell, her dear dad went to be with Jesus this week. And he was here with us last Sunday, on Easter Sunday, worshipping with us. And that man is somebody who every time I saw him, every time I spoke to him, the spirit of life in him was incredible. Yes? For anyone who met him? And you meet people like that, don't you? Every now and then. And I hope that there's something of that in me, and that I allow the Spirit of God to be more and more at work in me, so that when people meet me and remember me, they'll say, there was something about a real spirit of life in that person. He was in a wheelchair. His body was suffering, but he was full of the joy. He was full of the joy of God. And I believe and truly believe that when he walked through that passage from death to life, he's gone into glory. He's gone into glory, and he already knew that. He knew that before he died, even whilst his body was suffering. So alive. So alive. So isn't it amazing that Jesus went into battle with absolutely everything that speaks of death? And there's loads of stuff, isn't there? You know, we talk about it a lot. There's loads of stuff in our lives that is not fullness. It's not life. It's completely the opposite. And death can sneak in many ways in our lives. There can be physical death, can't there? Physical death, physical suffering. But there's stuff that goes on. You know, I can tell you sometimes around our table at dinner time, it's not very life-giving. Sometimes there's death, isn't there, in our attitudes. Sometimes it just oozes in the environment and we can taste it. And it's even those little types of death that if we allow God each and every day to come in and bring his life, that's what I'm asking for at the moment. Yeah? With our family, with 3 teenagers and us 2 control freaks, we need to see God's life breathing into those spaces, because that's where it counts on a daily basis. I'm not suffering with anything physically wrong with me in this moment, as far as I know, but there are things in my life that I'm desperate to see transformation and awakening, and we've got to every day be saying, God, that is from you. I know it's only from you. Please transform me, transform us by your Spirit. There's that wonderful verse, isn't there, in Romans 8:11, if we can have that up. So it's about the same power that raised Jesus from the dead. That's a promise for us. It's at work in us. It says, for you who welcome him, in whom he dwells, even though you still experience all the limitations of sin, you yourself experience life on God's terms. So if this alive and present God who raised Jesus from the dead moves into your life, he'll do the same thing in you that he did in Jesus, bringing you alive to himself. When God lives and breathes in you, you're delivered from a dead life. With his Spirit living in you, your body will be as alive as Christ's. And that's what I think when I looked at Karen's dad last week. None of us knew he wasn't going to be with us on this earth anymore this week, but his spirit was alive. His body was still alive with Christ. You heard on the Spotlight video that in a couple of weeks' time we're going to be looking at the book of Thessalonians, and it's called Awake. So let's go back to my dream and being called to wake up. And we're going to just read a passage from a verse from Ephesians 5:14, which I'm sure some of you know very well. It's the bit where it says, awake, O sleeper, and rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. And that verse really came to my mind when I was thinking about my dream, that it's in that spirit of being awake that we are fully alert to God and his Spirit, that there's a promise that then Christ will shine on us. We then have light. We can walk in light. So let's think about a scenario. If you're in bed at night and then there's an alarm that goes off and somebody shouts, wake up, save yourself, get out. You don't obey by waking yourself up. You've already woken up, haven't you? By the command itself, wake up, get up, you need to get out of the house. That has already woken you up. What we have to do, so in this instance, the message of the gospel message is we're already awake. But what we need to do is we then need to be wakeful people. In the face of danger, you then get up, don't you? You actually get up and leave the house. You're awake because you've heard the call, but then you respond in wakefulness. The call creates the waking, and we respond in the power of what the call created. So Jesus' call to us and the Spirit of God's call to life is what we've been celebrating. And we just need to be wakeful. And that's my prayer. Being reminded of my dream and what my Uncle Bob says, to stand by. I so would love for myself on a daily basis to be walking in wakefulness and as a church that we're doing the same thing. That every single day we can walk in that wakefulness and that knowledge that there is possibility. You know, that we love springtime. You know, the possibility of renewal and the Spirit breathing life into bones. That's what I want to be alert to. I remember back, Ben and I were part of Youth with a Mission when we met, and there was a speaker who came. I think she was South African, and some South Africans. We've got some South Africans in the room today, haven't we? Where are you all? I know, Gay, you're there, and you're there. You know, when sometimes I've heard some South African preachers, and man, when they preach, you know, with the accent as well, it's quite, you know, you sit up and you take notice. Anyway, this woman, she was speaking to the students, and I thought it was quite crazy, but she encouraged the students every day when they got up out of bed to stand in front of the mirror and to say to their spirit, "Wake up! I call out my spirit, the Spirit of God who's living in me." And I was reminded of that again the other day, and I thought, yeah, that's actually, do you know, it's so true, because we're so quick to fall asleep. We're so quick to become dulled to what has actually happened and what God has actually done for us. And so speaking to ourselves is actually a really good thing. It might be a bit crazy, but hey, who doesn't speak to themselves? You're not speaking to yourself, you're speaking to the Spirit of God. The Spirit of God who... we've invited him in, right? So we need to respond to that, call him out. So maybe we should try that. Stand in front of the mirror and say, "I speak to you, Spirit. I call forth that Spirit of life in me every day." Let's try it. So I want to move on to thinking about the awkward part that, you know, I'm wanting to really focus on life and resurrection. But obviously, there is no life without death. We can't talk about life without talking about death. And I was thinking a little bit about Thomas. You know, he's labelled Doubting Thomas, isn't he? And I read a little blog this week where he was talking about that Thomas, it's not really a story about Thomas needing to believe the fact of the resurrection, but he just couldn't get his head around the fact that Jesus was wounded, but yet he was resurrected. He still had those wounds in his hand, but he was alive. And if we're all honest, that is a hard concept, isn't it? But we all walk around with death and with life. We walk around with wounds. And yet, whilst we carry those things, we can also be fully alive in who Christ says we are. We can live in a new way despite death being evident. We can live as children of light, and we can radiate something really powerful that can't be overcome. And what I love about being in a community of believers is we're not on our own, you know, and there are times where we struggle to see or believe that there is a spirit of transformation. There might be something that you've been waiting for a really long time, or something that you're having to walk with, and you know there might be an illness that you're carrying with you for a long time. And why we're in a community? Because people can call out that spirit of life for us on our behalf, and people can point out growth and transformation. Again, I find it so encouraging when we spend time with my auntie and uncle, because we don't see them often. We just see them at various points during the year. And particularly in relation to the job that Ben and I do, where we became foster carers over 5 years ago. And as you know, we have Neil and Sarah with us, who are a part of our family. And so some of our family members, they've known those children in our family for that whole time. And on a daily basis, sometimes we don't see the change and transformation in our children, or even in yourselves. And it's great, isn't it, when you meet up with family members who know you and know you well, and they say, "That has changed," and you go, "Really? Wow, okay, that's great." People see transformation. We see change. We see renewal. We see potential in each other. And we need to not be silent. We've got to call that out. If we see growth and change and transformation in one another, then let's talk about it. Let's encourage one another. Let's be speakers of life, because we carry that life in us through Jesus. So let's speak it out. So the places where there seems to be death and dying can be the very places that have the most potential for life. I opened a compost bin this week, and you all know that my word for the year was compost. And this compost is some that my auntie had started making last year, and it was you couldn't identify anything in there. It's ready, you know. All the old scraps of everything have gone into this incredible, moist, damp, dark stuff that's going to do some good. And there is so much truth in that God takes the stuff that sometimes we throw away or we wish we didn't have, and he will make it into something that is so life-giving. I was trying to find a quote actually that Denise Wheeler, you found a quote a few years ago on a women's weekend from a lady called Shauna Nyquist, and she's got a fantastic quote, and I couldn't find it, but it was something about God taking the broken bits of our lives and breathing life into it and making something absolutely incredible. And I know the stuff that people in this room are going through that you probably wish wasn't happening, but in those places I'm praying and hoping, and I absolutely believe that God can bring the most life out of some of those hard things. There's that verse, isn't there, in John 12 verse 24. Can we have that up on the screen, Charlie? It says, unless a kernel of wheat is planted in the soil and dies, it remains alone, but its death produces many new kernels, a harvest of new life. Now obviously that speaks of Jesus' death, but we're called to imitate the way of Jesus. That means walking with him in his suffering, but it also means walking with him into his glory. Those things cannot be separated. They absolutely go hand in hand. We share in his sufferings and we share in his glory. I'm going to finish by reading a quote, and then we're going to spend a little moment meditating on a picture. That might not be for everyone's cup of tea, but I challenge everyone to be open and to be responsive, as Jan encouraged us before. So I'm just going to read this quote. Death and life are two sides of the same coin. You cannot have one without the other. And each time we surrender, each time we trust the dying, our faith can be led to a deeper level, and you may even discover something larger underneath. Yet each time it is a choice, and each time it is a kind of dying. It seems we only know what life is when we know what death is. The mystics and great saints were those who learned to trust and allow this pattern that we see all around us. And they often said, in effect, what did I ever lose by dying? Or try Paul's famous one-liner, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. So we're going to have an image up on the screen, and I'm also going to hand some of them round as well. So this is about 3 minutes. We're just going to sit with this image, which spoke really powerfully to me this week, and allow the truth of renewal to come through.